I never expected my life to change because of a hoodie. It was just a simple gray hoodie, nothing special really, just soft from years of washing and slightly oversized, the way I like them. But that hoodie became the catalyst for something I never saw coming, especially not with my roommate, Alex. Let me take you back to how it all started, because sometimes the most extraordinary moments happen in the most ordinary circumstances. Alex and I had been roommates for almost 2 years. We met through a mutual friend during our sophomore year of college, when we were both desperately looking for affordable housing near campus. I'm Jamie, by the way, art major, coffee addict, and hopelessly romantic according to my friends. I'd known I was gay since high school, and I'd been out to friends and family for years. It wasn't a big deal in my social circle, just another part of who I was. Alex, on the other hand, was the definition of a straight guy, or so I thought. He studied engineering, played intramural soccer, and had dated a string of girlfriends since I'd known him. He was tall with perpetually messy dark hair, the kind of guy who could roll out of bed looking unfairly good while I needed at least 20 minutes to look presentable. We got along surprisingly well from the beginning. Our apartment wasn't anything special, just a 2-bedroom place with a small living room and a kitchen that barely fit both of us at the same time, but it felt like home. I'd be lying if I said I never found Alex attractive. Of course I did. He had this easy confidence and genuine smile that made it hard not to notice him. But I'd mastered the art of appreciating his looks from a safe, emotional distance. Roommate attraction was a complication I didn't need, especially since Alex was straight. I valued our friendship too much to let any awkward feelings get in the way. We had movie nights, cooked terrible dinners together, and stayed up late talking about everything and nothing. He was my friend, my roommate, and that was enough. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The day everything changed started like any other Saturday in December. It was one of those winter days where the cold seeps through the windows no matter how high you crank the heat. Our apartment had notoriously bad insulation, something our landlord conveniently forgot to mention before we signed the lease. I remember waking up late, around 11, to the sound of Alex making breakfast in the kitchen, the clatter of pans, and the smell of coffee creating that familiar weekend atmosphere. I shuffled out of my room wearing sweatpants and my favorite hoodie, the gray one I mentioned earlier. It was nothing special to look at, but it was the softest thing I owned and perfect for cold mornings. Alex looked up from the stove where he was attempting to flip pancakes without creating a disaster. "Morning, sleeping beauty," he teased, a ritual greeting whenever I slept past 9. I thought hibernation season wasn't until next month. I mumbled something incoherent and made a beeline for the coffee pot, pouring myself a cup before I was capable of human conversation. That was our dynamic. He was the morning person, I was definitely not. After caffeine worked its magic, I leaned against the counter and watched him struggle with breakfast. "You know, there's an art to pancake flipping that you haven't quite mastered," I said, sipping my coffee with exaggerated judgment. Alex pointed the spatula at me accusingly. "Says the person who burned pasta last week." "Pasta, Jamie? How do you even burn pasta?" I laughed, remembering the smoke alarm incident that had our neighbors knocking on our door. "It's a special talent." We ate breakfast together at our small kitchen table, talking about nothing important. Assignments due, plans for winter break, the latest show we'd been binging. Ordinary conversation on an ordinary day. After breakfast, I claimed the couch with my sketchbook while Alex cleaned up the kitchen. It was our weekend routine. He cooked, I cleaned, or vice versa. The apartment was quiet except for the soft music playing from our shared speaker and the occasional comment tossed between us. As the afternoon wore on, the temperature seemed to drop even further. I pulled my hoodie tighter around myself, cursing our landlord and the ancient heating system that seemed to be more decorative than functional. "It's freezing in here," Alex complained, rubbing his hands together as he emerged from his room. He was wearing just a t-shirt, which seemed ridiculous given the temperature. "I can't find my hoodie anywhere." I glanced up from my sketch, raising an eyebrow. "Maybe if you actually put your clothes away instead of creating fabric mountains, you'd find things." He rolled his eyes at me, a familiar expression after 2 years of living together. "Not everyone can be as organized as you, Jamie. Your closet probably has color-coded sections." "It does not," I protested, though we both knew my clothes were indeed arranged by color. Some habits from growing up with a meticulous mother never fade. Alex wandered over to the couch and flopped down beside me, peering at my sketch. a cityscape I'd been working on for my final project. He was always interested in my art, even though he claimed he couldn't draw a straight line with a ruler. That was one of the things I appreciated about him. He never dismissed my passion the way some people did, as if art wasn't a real major. "That looks amazing," he said, and I felt that familiar warmth of his approval. Then he shivered dramatically. "Seriously though, I'm freezing. Let me borrow your hoodie." Before I could respond, he reached over and tugged at the sleeve of my hoodie. "Come on, sharing is caring. Get your own." I laughed, pulling away. "This is my favorite one." "All the more reason to share it," he insisted, with that grin that usually meant he was about to do something ridiculous. "It looks so warm, and you're being selfish." What happened next took me completely by surprise. Instead of giving up, Alex grabbed the bottom of my hoodie and in one swift movement, pulled it upward. Not off me, but up and over his own head as well. Suddenly we were both inside my hoodie, his face inches from mine in this fabric cave we'd created. I could feel his breath on my face, warm in contrast to the cold apartment. My heart was hammering so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "See? Perfect solution," he said, his voice softer now that we were so close. His eyes looked different somehow, darker, more intense than I'd ever seen them. There was a moment of silence, just our breathing in this strange, intimate space we'd created. I should have made a joke, should have pulled away and laughed it off. That's what would have maintained our comfortable friendship. But I couldn't move, couldn't think of anything clever to say. All I could focus on was how close he was, how his eyes kept dropping to my lips. "Alex," I whispered, uncertain what I was even asking. And then it happened. He leaned forward those few remaining inches and kissed me. It wasn't a dramatic kiss like in the movies. No crashing together of lips or desperate passion. It was gentle, almost questioning, his lips soft against mine. For a second, I was too shocked to respond. This was Alex, my straight roommate, my friend, kissing me inside my own hoodie. When my brain finally caught up to what was happening, I kissed him back. I couldn't help it. All those months of carefully maintained distance collapsed in an instant. The kiss deepened, became more certain, and I felt his hand come up to rest against my cheek. It lasted only seconds, but felt like everything had shifted in that brief moment. When we pulled apart, still enclosed in the hoodie, there was a beat of silence. I searched his face for regret or confusion, but what I saw instead was a mixture of vulnerability and something that looked surprisingly like relief. "I've been wanting to do that for a while," he admitted quietly, his voice slightly shaky. "I just didn't know how to tell you." The hoodie was getting uncomfortably warm now. Our faces flushed from more than just the trapped heat. With a gentle tug, Alex pulled it back down, so we were sitting normally again, though nothing about this moment felt normal. My mind was racing with questions. How long had he felt this way? What did this mean for us, for our friendship, for our living situation? And most confusingly, what about all those girlfriends? "You're straight," I blurted out, which wasn't the most eloquent response to being kissed, but my brain wasn't exactly functioning at its best. Alex ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd seen countless times before, but now seemed charged with new meaning. "I thought so too for a long time. But lately, I don't know, Jamie. I've been questioning a lot of things, especially when it comes to you." Let me explain why this confession hit me so hard. When you've spent months, years, even, convincing yourself that your feelings for someone can never be reciprocated, hearing that they might feel the same way is both exhilarating and terrifying. It's like finding out gravity might be optional after all. Everything you thought was fixed suddenly isn't. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, still trying to process this revelation. He laughed, but it was tinged with nervousness. "Are you kidding?" I was freaking out. I've never felt this way about a guy before. And you're my roommate, my friend. I didn't want to mess that up if I was just confused or something. And now, I couldn't help but ask, "Are you still confused?" Alex looked at me then, really looked at me, with an intensity that made my breath catch. "About some things, yeah? But not about wanting to kiss you." That's the clearest I've felt about anything in a long time. The hours that followed were filled with conversation, honest, awkward, necessary conversation. We moved to the kitchen table, made tea, and talked until our mugs were empty, and then made more. Alex told me about the growing realization he'd had over the past few months, how he'd tried to ignore his feelings but found them getting stronger instead. He explained how he'd always dated girls because it was expected, because it was easier, but had never felt the connection he thought he should. With you, it's different, he said, staring into his mug as if it held the right words. It's like, I'm more myself when I'm with you. Does that make any sense? It made perfect sense to me. I told him about my own feelings, how I'd been attracted to him almost from the beginning, but had buried those feelings deep, convinced they could never lead anywhere. We laughed about all the moments that, in retrospect, had been charged with unacknowledged tension. The late nights watching movies, sitting closer than necessary. The way his hand would sometimes linger on my shoulder. The time he'd gotten jealous when I mentioned a date I'd been on, though neither of us had recognized it as jealousy then. As evening fell and our apartment grew darker, we ordered takeout and continued talking, now sitting side by side on the couch, our shoulders touching. There was a new awareness between us, a delicate tension that was both exciting and scary. When his hand found mine, fingers intertwining cautiously, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. So what happens now? I finally asked, the question that had been hovering unspoken between us. Is this, are we? Alex squeezed my hand. I don't know exactly. I'm still figuring things out. But I know I want to explore this. Us. If you're willing to be patient with me. I nodded, understanding the complexity of what he was going through. Coming to terms with your sexuality isn't a linear process. I knew that from my own experience, and I could only imagine how confusing it must be to have that realization later in life, when you've already built an identity around different assumptions. We can take it slow, I assured him. No pressure to define anything right away. He smiled then, that genuine smile that had always made my heart skip. Except maybe we define that hoodie as ours now instead of just yours. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. I think that can be arranged. The days that followed were a delicate dance of our new dynamic. We were still roommates, still friends, but now there was something more simmering beneath the surface. We stole kisses in the kitchen while making dinner, held hands while watching TV, and talked late into the night about everything. Our fears, our hopes, the uncertainty of where this might lead. Alex was still navigating his identity, still understanding this new part of himself. There were moments of doubt, moments when he would grow quiet, and I could see him questioning everything. During those times, I gave him space, understanding that this journey was his to make, even if I was walking alongside him. 3 weeks after the hoodie incident, as we'd come to call it, Alex met my friends for the first time as more than just my roommate. I was nervous, not because I thought they wouldn't accept him, but because this made it real in a new way. We were no longer just exploring something private within the walls of our apartment. We were stepping out into the world together. My friends, being the wonderful people they are, welcomed him warmly. There were knowing smiles and a few, finally, comments that made me blush. Apparently my feelings for Alex hadn't been as well hidden as I'd thought. Alex, to his credit, was charmingly open about still figuring things out. All I know is that Jamie makes me happy, he said simply when my friend Sophia asked about his sexuality, a question I would have considered too forward but which Alex took in stride. The rest I'm still working on. That night, walking home hand in hand under streetlights, Alex seemed thoughtful. Your friends are great, he said after a while. They didn't make me feel like I had to have all the answers. That's because no one has all the answers, I replied, squeezing his hand. We're all just figuring it out as we go. He stopped walking then, turning to face me under the glow of a streetlight. I do know one thing for sure, he said, his expression serious. I'm falling in love with you, Jamie. That's the clearest thing in my life right now. My heart felt like it might burst. For someone still questioning so much about himself, this declaration was enormous. I reached up to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw with my fingers. I'm already there, I admitted. Have been for longer than I care to admit. When he kissed me then, right there on the sidewalk, it felt like a beginning. Not just of us as a couple, but of a new chapter where we could both be honest about who we were and what we wanted. The hoodie became something of a symbol for us after that. On cold evenings, we would sometimes both squeeze into it, laughing at how ridiculous we must look, but treasuring the closeness it created. Alex even bought me a new one for Christmas, oversized enough for 2 people, with a note that read, "For future spontaneous confessions." It hasn't all been easy, of course. Alex had to come out to his family, which was a process filled with confusion and difficult conversations. Some of his friends didn't understand at first, asking if this meant he was gay now, or if it was just a phase. These questions frustrated him not because they were offensive, but because he didn't have neat answers. "Why do I need to fit into a specific box?" he asked me one night after a particularly exhausting conversation with his brother. "Can't I just be someone who fell in love with his roommate who happens to be a guy?" I understood his resistance to labels. Sexuality is fluid for many people, and coming to terms with that fluidity can be a journey in itself. What mattered to me wasn't whether Alex identified as bisexual or pansexual or any other term. What mattered was that he was choosing to be with me, openly and honestly. 6 months after the hoodie incident, we decided to renew our lease, committing to another year in our drafty apartment with the terrible heating. It wasn't the most romantic setting, but it had become special to us, the place where everything changed, where a simple gray hoodie became the catalyst for something neither of us had expected. Sometimes I think about how easily it could have gone differently. If Alex hadn't been cold that day, if he hadn't decided to be playful with my hoodie, if either of us had been too afraid to acknowledge what was happening. So many small choices led to that moment, and so many small choices since have built what we have now. I'm not saying it's perfect. We still argue about whose turn it is to do the dishes and whether the thermostat should be set at 68 or 72 degrees. Alex still leaves his clothes in piles on the floor, and I still get grumpy before my morning coffee. But now when he pulls me close at night, when he absent-mindedly plays with my hair while we watch TV, when he kisses me goodbye before heading to class, in those moments, I'm grateful for every step that led us here. Last week, we were cleaning out our closet. Well, I was cleaning. Alex was mostly providing commentary, and I found that original gray hoodie pushed to the back of a shelf. It was even more worn now, with a small tear in one sleeve and the color faded from countless washes. I held it up, smiling at the memories it contained. "The famous hoodie," Alex said, coming to stand behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. "Should we frame it? Put it in a museum?" I laughed, leaning back against him. "I think it still has some life in it yet." He took it from my hands, examining it with exaggerated seriousness. "Definitely a historical artifact. The hoodie that changed everything. We could charge admission. Or," I suggested, turning in his arms to face him, "we could just wear it. You know, for old time's sake." His smile softened, understanding my meaning immediately. With a dramatic flourish, he pulled the hoodie over both our heads, just like that first time. We were closer now, more comfortable with each other. No hesitation as our foreheads touched. "Hi," he whispered, his breath warm against my lips. "Hi yourself," I replied, feeling that same flutter in my chest that had never really gone away. "Best impulse decision I ever made," he said, before closing the distance between us. And as we stood there, kissing inside that old gray hoodie, I couldn't help but agree. Sometimes the most extraordinary love stories start in the most ordinary ways, with cold apartments, borrowed clothes, and the courage to take a chance on something unexpected. Our story wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and it was still being written, one day at a time. Who knew a simple hoodie could change everything? Total _char_count, 18,654.